just want to thank our sponsors for today, and today's sponsor is Tech, the Executive Connection. I've been associated with Tech for many years. I've been both a member and a facilitator, a Tech chair. Tech is all about better decisions and better leaders. I think from my experience, the leadership and the learnings and the experience of the leaders of these groups have made a very big difference, a huge difference in my business life. And I think that if you contact them on www.tech.com.au, you can connect with Tech, the organisation, and I think it would be in your interests. So thank you, Tech. Welcome to the show. Today I have with me Ross Forrester from Westcourt Family Business Accountants. Ross, welcome.
Thanks, John.
Good to have you here today. I just want to find out, and I'm sure the listeners too want to find out about Westcourt Family Business Advisors and Accounting. What is it that Westcourt does? Tell us about it.
Well, our tagline is that we make family-owned businesses great. But I guess it's that concept of how did we get to that position in our journey, and why did we start?
Great. So, how did you start the journey?
So my dad was an insurance broker, and pretty much from when I was about 14, I worked with mum and dad's biz. So all through uni, I did whatever was needed to get you along. I did what was needed. So I think during university, for example, we had a 500 square metre office. I used to vacuum the floors, and I did all those little odd job bob things that were needed in the office. And that also included maintaining the books of mum and dad's business. I helped set up the computer programs. At the time, we were one of the first implementers of a computer rather than carbon-backed paper for sending out policy renewals. So I always had that long-term interest in mum and dad's business. And then when I sort of had to make a career choice, I chose to study commerce and business because I had that natural interest.
Were there siblings in the family?
Yeah, there were. So my brother and sister were never really that interested in what mum and dad were doing. My brother, we originally were farmers, and we moved in from the country because the farm wasn't that great for us at the time. There was a long drought, basically. So we moved to the city, and my brother decided to stay working on a farm, and my sister wasn't really engaged in the business at that time. So instead of working at McDonald's or in a pub or whatever it was during my school years and my university years, I worked for mum and dad, and those hours kept on increasing, and I kept my involvement with mum and dad's business right up until the stage as we sold it. So,
okay, interesting experience. So mum and dad decided to sell the business. Did they go on to something from there?
No. So we had a really good succession plan that we thought was good. The very long story short is that we were given an offer to sell, which was not a commercial market-based offer. It was strategic, synergistic value. And I guess we took the opportunity. We sort of had that view that, this was here for a purpose, and we would have generated our purpose better using that cash rather than the business. We weren't beholden to that business. It wasn't.
So this was a retirement strategy of mum and dad's?
It was a retirement strategy of mum and dad's, and it was also, we did have a CEO, and we did have a chair, and we did have a board operating, but it wasn't operating as well as it could have done. The offer to sell, we felt, we used to get a yearly market valuation as part of our employee share scheme that we're operating, but the market value that we're offered was probably not a market valuation. It was basically, we were approached about 8 times to sell, and we rejected the same guy 8 times, and ultimately we got an email which we just all fell off our chair. And we couldn't really have said no to that approach, and it was fortunate. It was always part of the strategy that type of transaction would have happened, and it did. But it was a bit of a hero or zero strategy that we embarked upon.
Okay. So that was mum and dad's strategy. Did you have a part to play in that
Yeah,
at all?
yeah. So I was always with mum and dad's biz. So during uni, I always worked in the business, and obviously during school. I then went out and worked in another accounting firm, and I was at KPMG. And then mum and dad went through a spot of bother, for the lack of a better word, and I always wanted to be self-employed as well. So I then left KPMG and then I joined up with mum and dad's biz. And at the time, the strategy was to run a consolidated financial advisory business. And then what we were going to do, mum and dad were running the general insurance part. We then had a financial planner on board. We got a finance broker on board, and then I was to run the advisory part of the business. And we were going to have cross ownership and run the thing really well. And that we did that for a few years. The financial planner, we had a few iterations of that type of person, and neither of us liked the culture in the financial planning community. And the finance broking at the time was also very much a sales orientated culture, and it didn't actually sit either with mum and dad or myself as a business unit. So we clarified and distilled the business operation down. Dad was also a general insurance broker at the time, and his mobility decreased because he was in a wheelchair. So it made him practically difficult to actually see people in their factories. So he was sort of compelled to pay people a commission for going out and doing the work. And then we found a scalable model to do that, but I was always on the board that we ran right up until the sale event.
Okay. So mum and dad sell the business,
Yep.
and then you're left to your own devices. Where do you go from there?
Yeah. So left to my own devices, we always had a clear strategy of how it would progress. The mum and dad's business, and we ended up with 190 people in mum and dad's biz.
Substantial size business.
Yeah, it was a good business, and it's all very exciting. But the hard truth is, for a long period of time, they didn't have the financial capacity to engage an accountant. And for a long period of time, we didn't know if it was going to work. We didn't know if the model we had was a profitable, sustainable model. We were very much a disruptor into an established market, and there was a lot of negativity associated with it. And Dad built up a lot of respect, and we admired that. But practically, the ability for him to actually pay me a living sustenance wage just didn't exist. We always anticipated this consolidated financial advisory business, and that's why I then focused on the accounting and advisory business to work side by side with the general insurance brokerage, just so that I could actually have money to live on and buy a house.
So this is the beginning of Westcourt?
Yeah, pretty much. That was the beginning and the origination. The concept of the big consolidated group didn't work because all of us were uncomfortable. But I started to get paid because mum and dad couldn't pay me. I needed to earn an income. So I then proceeded to start giving people assistance and advice off my own back while helping mum and dad as we went along the journey. And then I built my own business up. But we shared an office for 20 years, and I had quite a lot of day-to-day contact in terms of the management administration of what mum and dad were doing as well.
Okay.
Yep.
So you've started Westcourt.
Yep.
You're
20 years ago.
20 years ago. And you've taken on staff.
Yeah. So we've got about 15 people now.
Okay.
And they're fantastic people. We don't have this bosses and lemmings or drones mentality in the office. The people that we have are absolutely first class, and they actually give me a lot of value because there's just stuff I don't know, and there's also stuff that I am genuinely not interested in. And we've got people who absolutely love some of the stuff that they do, and it's really good to have their enthusiasm to sort of take over and run parts of the service lines.
So what I'm hearing is you've got a really great team that you've built up over the 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Yep.
And these people, the focus of this business is...
Yeah, so we sort of look at, we're really only focused on family-owned business. So, we don't do, for example, we don't do local government, we don't do not-for-profit, we don't do charities, we don't do ASX listed or unlisted public type companies. And we don't do audit, and we're not a liquidation firm. What we've done, rather than being everything to everyone, and basically, you name it, we do it, we really have narrowed our focus down to a boutique offering. So we need to collaborate with people. We need to use other people to give everything, but what we do really well.
What great clarity. We're going to take a break and we'll come back shortly and we'll talk about some of the challenges this brings up for you. So
okay. Thank you.
Come back shortly. Welcome back. We've got Ross Forrester from Westcourt Family Business Accountants. Ross has been telling us today about how he ended up in a business that he works for and with families who are in business. And Ross, before the break we were talking about lots of different things about what you do and how you focus.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you've had in the last 20 years of building this business.
Yeah, that's probably quite a long story. But what you do start with is that, in many ways you evolve when you get better as time goes on. So you get more sophisticated, and life gets in the way of your business as well. So you start off on a particular path, and then you get clarity, and you build up, and you learn and develop skills and understanding as time goes on. So often when you talk about your challenges now, you look back and you try and discuss that challenge, and it seems particularly embarrassing how you had this problem in the first place. And the reason why you don't have it now is that you had it back then. So the primary problem, which I think is pretty common to everybody, is your staffing problem. And initially we actually shared a lot of our staffing between Mum and Dad's business and my business. And that was sort of done by pure necessity in terms of cost. I couldn't afford to employ someone, Dad couldn't afford to employ someone. So we co-shared staff. We shared a receptionist, we shared an internal accountant. I used to have actually a contract accountant to Mum and Dad's business who did all their work. And it's that classical thing about having two bosses. So the two bosses we kept on persisting with that, with multiple attempts and multiple people. But the two bosses, one staff member would either go my side or another staff member would go to Dad's side. And there was constant conflict that we had about that. And we had to ultimately, sever the umbilical cord and say, my people are my people and your people are yours. That also had problems in terms of culture management, because Dad's business had a very strong sales type of culture, and the accounting culture is more analytic and conservative and reserved, academic type culture. So the two groups didn't really mix that well, and that always posed problems because we were sharing an office, and there was always a little bit of ongoing niggly complaints, and that niggle complaining gossip by different staff members kept on growing and growing, and it became, sometimes these small issues became the very large issues, which was difficult for me to manage at times.
So you moved out of the same premises. So was that the defining point?
Yeah, so once Mum and Dad sold their business, we then had an option. We were then sharing an office with effectively a publicly listed ASX top 25 company, which was not a solution long term for either of us. We actually co-shared a lease. So that's the reason why we moved out. In the meantime, we talked about putting down petitioning. While Mum and Dad owned the business, we talked about petitioning and all this type of stuff to get separation for better culture engagement. But you're practically talking about a 50, 70 grand renovation just because we've got a silly 20-year-old who's bickering in the background. So it's sort of hard to justify this cost for that type of issue. So ultimately now there's a full separation, but that's been created by the sale.
So you've separated out, you've got your own offices now, you've got your own staff now.
Yep.
The challenge of getting new business and new clients.
Yeah, so the your primary way of getting new business and new clients is by great service, and by deepening relationships. But at the same time, you can deepen your relationships, you can give awesome service, but some people just will not refer to you because that's the character and build-up of who they are. That's fine. And some people, we've had clients now. I've still got my first 5 clients, and I've known them now for 20 years. And I sort of know their network, and I know who they are, and we're sort of comfortable with each other, and that's really great. But we have to also make sure we create new relationships. So we've got a structured policy with staff, is that if any of our staff take a leadership position, we do a sponsorship of the staff member's leadership position. And we also do a couple of key sponsorships in the community where we can make sure that we're not only helping that particular community area, we can also show thought leadership as well. Because we don't see that advertising, come here because I'm here, works. We actually just want to make sure that we help people. We like to give before we get. And if we help people and create relationships, then good things hopefully flow from that.
Because you work almost as a family practice, or you're not almost, you are working as a family practice.
Yep.
Do you find the challenges of some of your clients are very similar?
Yeah, yes you do. So the primary challenge that we do come across is that we are talking to clients at a financial side of things. So there's a lot of financial similarities that is caused just by your economic cycle. But when you dig deeper, the financial motivations are different. And for 70 to 80% of our clients are first generation families, but of that 70 to 80%, we're probably looking at about a third to half of them actually employ a family member within the business. So, simple things about remunerating that family member in a way that's sort of both payroll tax effective, but creating that individual and having them capable of buying a house, for example. It's very simple to say, we're accountants, let's make a profit distribution to that family member rather than paying them a salary to avoid the payroll tax. But if you do that, all of a sudden that family member has no salary, so they can't get a home loan to buy a house. So you need to create a discussion among the family as to, if we do this and we save 5.5% of their salary in payroll tax, how are we going to deal with that individual getting ahead in life and buying their own home and creating a family and getting certainty? And that's difficult.
Yeah. So do you go through many situations where you're talking about exit strategies as well? Are they challenges for some of these multi-generational family firms?
Yeah, they are a challenge. Quite often there's been a gentle, holistic discussion among the family about it, but sometimes that gentleness isn't clear enough for some people. Some people need to be told 15 times what the exit strategy is for it to get through. I've got a 5-year-old boy, and I tell him 5 times a day, you always say please, you always say thank you. Now, when he's 20, I'm going to probably still need to repeat myself in some way, shape or form. And some of the families that we deal with, their exit strategy is very lightly talked upon, and then it's left. And there's an assumption that the other person knows what's going on. And that's not always the case. Sometimes people within the family don't hear the full story, and you need someone to help that exit strategy being clarified. Sometimes there is no exit strategy because there's not enough money. So the focus isn't on the exit strategy, it's actually making sure that the business is a sustainable business that's capable of being transferred. Because if there's no money, sometimes it's a case of actually being really harsh and saying, this business currently doesn't really have an exit strategy for this person. So this person, maybe the best thing they can do is actually leave and get a job. And that's a hard call to make, and you don't really want to do that, but sometimes it might be necessary.
So in the picture of challenges, how many people in your firm have these kinds of conversations with clients? Because these are very heavy duty conversations about staying in a business or working somewhere else.
So typically we try and get, if it gets quite difficult, we have to get outside people to help us. You can't do everything, and sometimes it's good to have the outside person give an independent, new, fresh set of eyes, especially when you've been looking after someone for 20 years. You've been saying the same thing for 20 years. You need an outsider to come in and say that again and everyone listens to the outsider. So
it's an amazing thing. The word that comes to mind is interdisciplinary approach.
Yeah.
So
and our skill set includes a technical element. There's other people whose skill set is pure emotion or understanding of how the mind works, and we do a bit of that, but it's only a bit. It's not our full-time job.
Fantastic.
Yep.
Thanks very much. We're going to go to a break now, and we'll come back and hear some more from Ross.
Okay.
Welcome back. We've just had a nice chat through the break, and I think now if I ask Ross, where do things sit today? How does that work today? What does it look like today for you and your business and your clients?
Yeah, so the fundamental concept that we're having is that we're wanting to be focused on the families, and then when you do that, we've got that 4 key service offering. We cut red tape, we provide people with certainty, we also increase their wealth, and we help people successfully transfer their legacy. So if I look at my own parents' position, selling the business hasn't abdicated the obligation to transfer the legacy. So preparing both myself and my brother and sister to be capable of taking on the legacy is an important part of that. And we take that knowledge at a personal level, and also what you learn through your professional contacts and your ongoing development. You've got to reapply that back to clients.
I'm just interested, because you're taking a lot of your own personal experience, do you find that you have to be aware of your bias?
Yeah,
situation?
You do. It's actually really difficult to always put that bias back. Importantly, what we're doing is that we're giving advice to people, and there's always going to be, we're not mediators, we're advisors. So in order to give advice, you've got to come up with a decision. And to say that my decision and my advice is completely free of value judgments, I just can't do that. And normally with our clients, they always take that on board. Most people will have a group of advisors who consult and help them. Sometimes we're the most trusted advisor, sometimes we're not. But when you do help the client and you collaborate with views, the other people giving advice will have a different perspective, and I've got to respect that and admire that. Our family personally gives money to charity, but there are a lot of other people who do a lot more, and there's a lot of people who do a lot less. And I just respect where they're coming from. But as a business model, we try to focus on what we do focus on and understand that other people are different. It's also a little bit challenging for me personally now, in that I've got a business partner who's employed his nephew. So I've come from a position of being within a family business, looking at the outsiders, and now I've got David, who's a fantastic bloke, and I really love working with him. But we've also got to make sure that we deal with policies so that he's not seen as being favoured, or he's not being seen as non-favoured because of his role and involvement with the business. So
I talk a lot about rules in this particular instance. So do you have processes and documents and a set of rules for family in the business?
Yeah.
Are they documented?
So they're partially documented. We could do a better job. We're not perfect. We're still learning. But what's important is, if you've got a family member in a business, like David, g'day David, you've got to make sure that whoever is senior to David has a clarity of the fact that he is a family member, and in the event that they perceive they're being conflicted or pressured because of the family relationships, they've got an outside person to talk to outside of the family. So typically we've sat down with David and we've sat down with his superiors on an individual level, and we've just clarified that if there was, and luckily it hasn't occurred, but if there was a position where his superiors felt conflicted, they have an opportunity to talk to me. And we also have I have a business mentor through tech. They've also got her contact point if they feel uncomfortable in talking to me, so that their superiors aren't put in a conflicted position, because David, in some way, shape or form, by some person, they might feel that he's being favoured because he's related to Craig. And that might be real, it might be imagined, but just to make sure that we get clarity on it, we've got that clear.
You mentioned tech. is this a place you go for, and I'm aware of tech, as you know, but is this a place you go for professional development? You know, once you've got your qualifications as an accountant, you still get updates, obviously, but where else do you go? Is this where you would go?
So the tech group is fantastic at a personal level, mainly, in that I get a lot of leadership development and understanding in how to run a business and how to be a better business leader. And there's a big crossover into my personal life as well, just by default. There's no such thing as a separate business life to a personal life. Prior to joining tech, my professional development was purely technical. I do a lot of technical tax leadership positions, and that's fantastic. But when you're pure technical, you can sometimes miss the bigger picture, and tech has helped me open up my approach and mindset to that, and I've really enjoyed that. Family Business Australia has also been a good eye-opener in terms of understanding that depth of knowledge and how it should work. And you also learn off the guys I work with and also your clients. You know, you're being in advisory, it's a joy because your clients are paying you while you're learning off your clients. It's actually quite a privileged position. So.
It's a most unusual position because when you say you're learning off them and at the same time there's a real sharing between the customers. So it's a very strong relationship business that you've created.
Yeah, which you want to get there with everyone. Some people don't get there and some people do, and it's about giving people time and space to develop a relationship as they see fit. And we're not for everyone and everyone's not for us, so it works okay. Well,
you understand where you are in your business, and I think that comes across from what I've known of you and heard of you. So more about today, the business is comfortable, growing?
So we've got... It's a hard call because you want to make sure that you're personal and engaged, but in order to make sure you're offering the right type of service, you've also got to make sure that you grow to get greater capacity. We haven't gone down the route of offshoring our work. Rather than that, we've actually tried to make sure that we automate our work. So we've sort of got a policy in the firm that we want to eliminate work where possible. There's a lot of rubbish work in accounting which is really not needed by anyone. So we either eliminate it, we automate it, so we're using technology massively to get rid of the drudgery, or you delegate the work down to someone else who can do it, and we've got great team members to do that. So one of the concerns is that I don't want to, if you outsource a process, sometimes you outsource the ability to innovate that process. And we've been fortunate to keep this work internally, and we've been fortunate that we've had staff who are brave enough to say, this is rubbish work, I don't want to do it. And they've actively looked for solutions to automate that process. And we've done that really well with the use of the cloud software programs. And I'm a little bit of a dinosaur in the practice.
I was about to ask you, technologically, if you're pushing the boundaries, do you have someone particular internally that focuses just on the IT?
So we've got a couple of different, because you've got your own internal automation processes and you've got your external client ones. So we've got one of the great things that we did about 6 years ago is that we employed a fantastic practice manager. She came from a larger firm of about 60 people, and we employed her and she's created a lot of that automation. We also sent her on national conferences in turn for practice managers. We're part of an international network, and she also runs the practice manager network to try and get new ideas, and we've implemented a lot of those ideas. So, 7 years ago we were very much it was a paper wall. You sort of had that image of the accountant going in and there's this pile of paper, all around them. And now we're very streamlined and we're very automated for a lot of that lower value work. So one of our clients recently, we linked them up with a software program called HubDoc, and that's actually freed up 2 full-time employees within their business to use HubDoc to basically automatically read invoices and code them into the accounting program. So
maybe I should find out what that's called. I think that's fantastic.
So we've got an internal person that focuses on that, and then a couple of the staff members have championed that. So with every team member that we've got particular areas of champion. work that they do, and we've got 2 people who are really just massively into the computer technology space, and I'm internally grateful for that, because that's one of the areas that it doesn't really float my boat, but I understand the importance of it, so I can reach out to them.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
We're going to go to another break now, and we'll come back shortly. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So welcome back. We're still here with Ross. And Ross, a few things about advice, suggestions, ideas, learning, sharing that you can do with some of the people watching and listening today.
Yep.
From your experience about working in a family business and moving through.
Yeah, so the easiest time, if you're running a family business, to get these things set is when you're starting out. When you're starting out, the kids typically are younger. They're more open to new ideas, and getting this clarity of what's going to happen is significantly easier when you start out. So even if you're starting out and the business is just husband and wife, getting separate job descriptions between the husband and wife and getting a clarity for how people's efforts will impact the business and who's doing what is really important. Just stop the internal dynamic and people overstepping on each other. And just because you write down the job description and how the business will work, that's a good document to have for now, but it's not a permanent document. So often we'll see a lot of people put endless hours into making everything perfect, and they end up with nothing. And we're very much, I understand different people are different, but I prefer to have 80% done than 80% done of 100 things.
You're suggesting a living document,
A living
something that
document,
can be adjusted and changed as circumstances change.
Yeah. So I'm using the wrong words, but something that can be changed to get some initial clarity as to how this thing will work. That can then evolve and build. If you're starting and you're just about to exit, there's not really much structure around it, the journey is a lot harder, because if you've been running a business for 40 years and for 40 years something hasn't been discussed, you've got effectively a lot of talking through to get that exit and succession happening.
So that's a planning conversation. What are we going to do? What are you going to do? What do I need to think about? Where am I going to? What am I stepping into? What am I in for?
It's much easier to do this process over 10 years rather than the person wanting to do it in 2 months. If it's over 10 years, you can start to slowly touch and water down and let things evolve slowly as people start to think about things. If you're looking at a sale where one child is recognised for their efforts and another child is not, it's actually a lot easier to give that over 2 to 3 years of thought process for people to get comfortable with where it's going, rather than do it really quickly. If it's happening really quickly, I would be inclined to get someone else who knows what they're talking about to do a really short, sharp discussion point for that exit.
Sometimes these conversations aren't had.
No.
And somebody passes away, and all of a sudden the conversation comes out once the reading of the will has happened.
Yeah. So that does happen. If that happens to us, for example, we would see that as a massive failure. I don't want to meet the kids when mum and dad have died. If I'm doing that scenario, that classically means that as an advisor, I've been a bad advisor.
How many people do you know that will come to you for the first time don't have wills?
Yeah, so a lot of them do, and I understand why. Some people have got a lot of energy inside them, and they don't want to stop. And if they do a will or their estate, it can open sores, and some people have a morbid fear of death, and I respect that. A basic will is better than no will.
Even something from a news agency or a post office?
Yep. And I've got some, most of our clients, not most, but a good percentage of our clients, their wills are actually pretty simple. Him to her, her to him, and split 3 ways among the kids. Now, if that's all there is, that's a will just needs to affect that. We've got kids who are getting divorced who then inherit money, and it's not a good outcome. There are simple structures now, and the cost of doing this properly is not much, but sometimes there just needs to be a bit of a push. And as an accountant or any advisor, sometimes you can only really make a 1% impact over a year, but if you've got a client for 2 or 3 decades and you compound that 1%, you sort of look at the end of the journey and you've now got a 40% impact. But it's sort of a gentle, kind approach. Getting your estate planning is more than a will. It's things like, do the kids know what's going on? Do the kids know do the kids know who the real estate agent is who manages the property? Do the kids know where a copy of the lease contracts are for all the rental agreements you've got with the property? It goes much, much deeper, because we've always taken the view that it's not kind to send a child on a learning course while they're in grief. So if a child is grieving, it's not good to have them marching into our office, rustling through receipts, trying to figure out what was going on.
Sure. So here the kind of thing is, have the conversations sooner than later.
Yeah.
And the lessons, if you don't have a will, get a will. It's not all that difficult to keep it simple.
So when those conversations start, it needs to be best fit for the family. Sometimes it starts at a very kind level, and then sometimes someone else will just reinforce what's going on, and then that conversation will build up. Sometimes the conversation needs to start with an independent person at the very beginning doing a big presentation, but what's important is understanding where the family's coming from, how the dynamics work, and who's best placed to have a kind of conversation in the right situation. And that's actually quite hard to know. You need to know the people really well, and sometimes what works for dad doesn't work for mum. And if dad's going on a particular path, that's great, but sometimes mum is mum, and mum will go on her own path as well. And this is quite often the case with very successful people. Both mum and dad and the kids are all successful, and they've all got different approaches. So getting that clarity at a gentle, sensitive level to build up into something we find is a good way.
So the overtime plan.
Take
as much time as you can. And be open to the conversations. And emotion gets in the way. You've got to try and keep that emotion.
But the beautiful thing about families in business, it's like if you and I are in business and we have a really horrible argument, there's a good chance that we will never talk again. With a family can actually have quite a horrible argument, but you still love each other and you've still got that permanent bond. My brother will always be my brother, and my mum will always be my mum. So you can actually be quite a lot more robust and open in a discussion among a family, and still maintain love. And that's one of the beauties that we love about the families in business, is that there's a background of love with how these things are running. And you can run conversations in that light. Whereas if it was a corporate meeting, you've got all your secretarial duties and governance issues, which are basically cookie-cutted by ASX listing rules. A family's so much more nimble and flexible, and they don't need that. But what they need is something that's really best fit for them.
What a great line. Something that's best fit for families, something that's family business, and that's your focus, Ross. I want to thank you for coming in today. Thank you for sharing with us. It's really been a pleasure.
Oh, thank you.
And I look forward to catching up in the not too distant future. Yeah. So thanks very much. Really appreciate your time on the Family Business Show.
Thank you, John.
I just want to thank our sponsors for today, and today's sponsor is Tech, the Executive Connection. I've been associated with Tech for many years. I've been both a member and a facilitator, a Tech chair. Tech is all about better decisions and better leaders. I think from my experience, the leadership and the learnings and the experience of the leaders of these groups have made a very big difference, a huge difference in my business life. And I think that if you contact them on www.tech.com.au, you can connect with Tech, the organisation, and I think it would be in your interests. So thank you, Ted.